An important part of measurements in chemistry is understanding what measurements mean and how to convert those measurements into other units using dimensional analysis or factor label method. So we're going to go through an example together that I have created using the Biltmore estate as an example. So if you read through this, the original Biltmore estate contained approximately 125,000 acres of land. If an acre is 4,840 yards squared, calculate the size of the estate in square meters. When you go to do a problem, it is a good idea to kind of envision what this is saying. And so there are two pieces of information in this example. One is dealing with the Biltmore estate, and we're given the information that there was approximately 125,000 acres in the original estate. Then there is a statement here if an acre is 4,840 yards squared. So you want to pick out from the information what is the measurement that we're being given, and then what is some information that we can use in order to complete the calculation we're being asked for. So I have a picture here of the original Biltmore estate. So this was an early image of the Biltmore estate, and then below it you'll see an original map. So this shows how much land there was. This is the measurement in this conversion problem. So a conversion problem has to have a measurement, and our measurement is the size of the Biltmore estate, the 125,000 acres. So this just gives you an idea of what this looks like. So if we go back to this, we're going to base our calculation on the measurement 125,000 acres. We need to think about how can we take the unit of acres and build a problem around that. Well, we have the statement an acre is 4,840 yards squared. That statement is not a measurement. It's given us a conversion factor. So the an acre is the same thing as 1 acre. That is equivalent to 4,840 yards squared. And so this piece of information is going to be a conversion factor that we will use when we set up the problem. So this introduces area in terms of dimensions. So acre is a unit of area. But when you put it into dimensions, it shows that it's a two-dimensional piece of information. The way that we convert things that are two-dimensional and three-dimensional based on length units is we use the equalities for those length units. So since we have yards squared, we're going to need to use what we know about yards. And we know that 1 yard is the same thing as 3 feet. We also know that 1 foot is the same thing as 12 inches. And since the question is asking us for meters squared, that is metric. And the best way for us to go into the metric system is 1 inch is the same thing as 2.54 centimeters, because that is an exact definition between those two units. So the centimeters would get us into the metric system, and we've learned that 100 centimeters is the same thing as 1 meter. But what you should notice about each of these pieces of information, these are all just one dimension. The original is yards squared, so we need to square each of these conversion factors, and if we do that, then the unit, if we square 100 centimeters and we square 100 meters, because if 100 centimeters is the same thing as 1 meter, then 100 centimeters times 100 centimeters is also equal to 1 meter times 1 meter, which is 1 meter squared. If we do that, then we will keep squared units throughout our problem, and our answer will end up in squared. So I'm going to show you how we would set this up using our starting measurement and then squaring each of them. So if we have $125,000 acres, then our first equality has to be the one that involves acres. And that's going to be our given equality of 1 acre is the same thing as 4,840 yards squared. This conversion factor has yards squared. I did not create the yards squared, it was given to us. But when we start using our common equalities, like yards and feet, then those do not have squared. So we have to square the entire equality. And the way that I recommend that you square an equality is you have to square the number and square the unit. So I'm going to put a squared at the number and a squared at the unit. Squared at the number and squared at the unit. So 3 squared feet squared is equal to 1 yard squared. So this will cancel out the acres, and this will cancel out the yard squared. So then we have feet squared, and so we're going to use the equality that has feet and convert that to inches. But that is not squared, and so just like the previous equality, we have to square our equality to make it be an area instead of one-dimensional. This will cancel out feet squared, and it'll give us inches squared. So from inches squared, we can go into the metric system into centimeters by using the equality between inches and centimeters. And so if 1 inch is the same thing as 2.54, then if you do the area of that, a 1 inch square is the same thing as 2.54 times 2.54 centimeters. So this will cancel out the inches squared and will be in the metric system in centimeters squared. But we want to continue until we get to meters squared. So the last one will be a metric conversion. We'll put the 100 centimeters on the bottom and the 1 meter on top. But again, it needs to be the area, so we need to square our equality, and that will cancel out centimeters squared. And our unit at the end will be meters squared, which is what the question is asking us for. So once we have the unit that matches what we want it to be, then we're going to use the calculator and we're going to do those calculations. So I'll display it while I'm going through this. So we've got to start with the measurement. And so I'm going to, since I wrote it down this way, we're going to only do what it says. So we have 125,000. So 125,000, and then times 4,840, and then we have 3 squared, so we're going to go times 3 squared, and then also on the top is times 12 squared, and then there's a 2.54 squared on top, so it's 2 times 2.54 squared. And then the last equality is in the denominator, and it's 100 squared. So I'm going to divide by 100 squared. And then I'm going to hit enter. So I get for my answer 505,857,052, and there's a decimal, and there's an 8. And the unit is meters squared. So our original measurement was the 125,000 acres. That's what we were converting. And an acre is a large amount. Meter squared is kind of small, so it does make sense. This number here is bigger than the 125 numerically, but they should be the same area. But if we look at this and we compare it to this, there are a lot of significant figures. So we need to round this answer to have the matching number of significant figures, because this is only approximately 125,000. So we want to look at this, and with significant figures, the first non-zero is going to be your first significant figure, and when there's no decimal point present, the last significant figure is your last non-zero. So this is only 3 significant figures. So we're going to start over here with this measurement. First non-zero is your first significant figure, and then we're going to count over to the third digit, which this is our third significant figure. So we need to round to this position right here. So this will be 506, but this is way, way, way to the left of the decimal, and so I need to put all the placeholder zeros so that I can know what position this is in. And so in place of where the 8 was, I'm going to put a 0. In place of where the 5, I'm going to put a 0. In place of where the 7 is, I'm going to put a 0. And then where the 0 is, I'm going to put a 0. In place of where the other 5 is, I'm going to put a 0. And in place of the 2, which is in the 1 spot, I'm going to put a 0. And the unit is meters squared. So if we put commas in, we can see how large that is. We can also write this in scientific notation. So really large number, you can write it in scientific notation. And so in scientific notation, we go to the first non-zero and we put our decimal point there. And then we only keep the significant figures. So it would be 5.06. And then we do times 10. And we're going to count how many places from where the decimal is understood to be. How many places do we got to move it to go to here? So that would be 1 place, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 10 to the 8th. So this number here is the same thing as 5.06 times 10 to the 8th. And then our unit is meters squared. So 125,000 acres is approximately the same area as 5.06 times 10 to the 8th meters squared, or 506 million meters squared.